Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So we are actually going to be talking about my first wedding cake. So it is the first one of this year. I've got a couple of inquiries for later in the year, and then I've already got some bookings for next year. But we're going to be talking about basically kind of how it went, just an overview. If you want a separate video on like a full walkthrough of my day, the process, the cake that I made, the process of making it, and I can kind of like talk you through what I did, and just kind of my experience in detail, then do let me know because I can make a video on that. But today we're mainly going to be talking about what I learned and any kind of recommendations that I'm going to be kind of following, and I think that would be good for anyone that is considering making wedding cakes to follow. And yeah, it's just kind of like first impressions of making wedding cakes, what to expect, and any tips basically. So as usual, I have all my notes. So we're going to be touching on quite a few things. I will put categories so that you can skip to the bits that you want, because I think it will be useful for this video. But we're going to be talking about prep, baking, stacking, because it's tiered cakes, delivery, the car specifically, and also a little bit about pricing. Again, I will be doing a separate video on my new way of pricing and wedding pricing, just because they are different. But yeah, so before we get into it, I wanted to quickly mention this. It's not bacon related, but people seem to be very interested in my nails. They were interested in them in one of the lives and in one of my other videos, so I thought I'd show you because I got some new nails done. So just quickly, we're going away next week, so I got these little cherries and I think they are adorable, and I'll put the little app for the person in case you want to go and have a look at them. Probably aren't bothered, but yeah, I always get questions about nails with being a baker. I've never heard anything about not being able to have them, as long as you wear gloves and obviously like don't stick your nails and stuff, then I think you're fine, and just like thoroughly washing your hands the same as you would normally. But in terms of like having any acrylic polish, it's no different to painting your nails because it's still polish. But yeah, so really cute nails for my holiday next week. I'm going away to Weymouth, so there will be pre-uploaded videos. I'm not quite sure what they're going to be yet because obviously I don't have much time to film them, but I want there to be something while I'm away. But yeah, it's just an England holiday, so nothing crazy. But yeah, and there's also going to be a vlog for that, and it will just be a whole week vlog, which will go up after I get back. And that will just show you what I got up to. But yeah, anyway, we're going to get into the wedding video. So let's get started. Right, we're going to talk about prep because I always say this, if I'm ill prepared, it only makes me more stressed, and this goes for any cake. Whereas if I have done as much prep as I possibly can, I just feel 10 times more at ease. And I was actually very at ease when making this wedding cake. The only thing that I didn't like is because it was red velvet, it needs to be red, and it did not go as red as I liked. The taste, amazing, perfect, and like they loved it, but the first trial, like the first lot of sponges that I did, they were just they were a very dark red, but it was more brown. So when I cut the top layer off, it was more brown, and I was like, they're paying a lot of money for this, I can't do that. So I rebaked them all, and they turned out like really vivid red, and I was like, great, we're good. And it was my fault, I didn't put a tablespoon of colouring as it advised. I did slightly less because I thought, oh, that looks red enough. I did it by the colour of the mixture, but then obviously when it's baked it just goes more brown. So yeah, definitely follow your recipe. I thought that I was being smart. I was like, well, it already looks really red, I don't want it to be too red. And then yeah, I should have just done what the recipe said, because I ended up having to rebake them all, but it turned out well in the end. But prep is everything. So what I would recommend doing, things like boards, boxes, dowels, anything like cake toppers, anything like that, if you can do them in advance, which you can, then do. I did all the boards, boxes, I did them like 4 days before, I think. I did them on the Monday and I started baking on the Friday. I did them all really early just so that they were done, and I try and do this with cakes as well, just normal occasion cakes. I try and do all the boards, boxes at least 2 days before, which is going to be a day before I actually start baking, so that I'm not having to worry about it. So I just try and do as much prep as possible, just because if you can prep stuff in advance, whether it's fondant, anything like that, it means that on the day all you've got to do is bake the cake and stack it, because all the decorations that are going on top are already done, so it just makes it so much more like relaxed and easy. Just recommend it so much. Do as much prep as possible. It's great. If you can prep, do it. Saves you a lot of time, and also have some kind of plan. I love lists. I write a list every single day. I don't complete them every day, but I write a list every day. I just find it keeps me on track. And I write a list every time I'm baking, and it will be like bake this sponge, crumb coat this, and I'll tick them off as I've done it. And I think that's really good for a wedding cake, especially just to make sure that you're getting everything done on time. You can put little time schedules to say, it needs to be crumb coated on Thursday, and then I need to decorate it by 12 p.m. on the Friday, something like that, just to keep yourself on track. So plan the design is number one. Make sure that you know exactly what you're doing in terms of the design, and also how you get to that final product, what you need to do first, your sort of schedule. Then you want to plan your journey and timings, definitely, just to make sure that you're on time, because obviously it's slightly different with like birthday cakes. If someone says, can you deliver around 11, that's perfectly fine. But when someone's wedding is at a certain time, and their guests are arriving at a certain time, you need to be set up and out of there by that time. So like mine, she actually changed the time on me, which was a little bit confusing, but it ended up working out in the end. So a week before, she moved it an hour earlier, and then I was all ready by 2 p.m. and I think that was because initially she wanted me to come at 2 p.m, which would mean that by the time I set up, which was an hour, then obviously people would already be there, whereas I was finished by 2 and then people were arriving, which completely makes sense. The only issue was that I already had a wedding that morning, so I was trying to get back from the other wedding to then go to her wedding. But yeah, luckily there were no issues, but definitely plan your journey, plan your timings, because you do not want to be late. Obviously that was something that I couldn't control, and she was fully aware that she had moved it, rather than me, but yeah, just make sure you plan your journey, because things like traffic come into it, and also you have to be so careful when driving a wedding cake that you don't want to be in a rush, because if you are, you're going to end up ruining the cake in the process. So last thing in terms of prep is to make sure that you take a deposit. This is pretty self-explanatory, but a lot of people don't take deposits for normal occasion cakes, whereas I always do. So for a wedding cake, I will go into this later, but for a wedding cake, I take the deposit, which is 25%, and this is because wedding cakes are more expensive, whereas occasion cakes, I take a £20 deposit, and that is off of the whole value, and then the remaining balance is given a week before. So I do the same thing with wedding cakes. The balance is given a week before, however it's 25% deposit, which say it's like a £200 cake, that will be £50 rather than the £20 for an occasion cake. And that is to buy anything in advance. You want to make sure that you're getting that, because any flowers, any toppers, any ingredients, typically wedding things usually need to be ordered in advance. If it is flowers or if it's like a personalised topper, then you need to be buying that in advance, whereas occasion cake things, you can, like flowers and things, because they're artificial, and the standard is usually lower, you can buy them on, like I buy mine on Amazon, or I get them from places like The Range, because they have like a huge flower section for like fake flowers. Whereas like wedding flowers, if they're going to a florist, obviously you're going to have to buy that in advance, so you need to make sure you have the money up front to do that. Sometimes your bride will have a florist. Mine bought hers herself, they were artificial, but a couple of my other brides that I've got next year, they've got their own florist for the bouquet, so they're using them, and that's perfectly fine, it saves me a job. But yeah, just make sure that you're taking money up front. I know people that don't typically do wedding cakes, or they're new to it, they might not know to do certain things, so that's why, obviously, for people that do it regularly, you're going to know that. But if people are just starting out, then they may not know this. So in terms of baking, you want to make sure, and this is going to be a throughout thing for the whole video, but give yourself plenty of time. This goes for any part of the process, but mainly baking, because you don't want anything to be hot. And obviously, like, if the weather's hot, then you want to, again, give yourself plenty of time, because you need to be stacking and decorating in the colder times of the day. And I actually was on a hot day when I did this wedding cake, so I gave myself plenty of time. And then I was baking in the morning and stacking in the evening and decorating in the morning, etc. So you want to make sure you give yourself plenty of time, because if you stack a cake hot, it's not so much an issue. Like, I never stack cakes hot, but if you were in a rush, it's not so much an issue if it's a one tier. But obviously, because these cakes are going to be stacked on top of each other, you need to make sure they are thoroughly cooled, because the weight of the next one on top is going to put pressure on the one below. So you need to make sure that they are not hot or even warm. So what I do is I bake them the night before I'm going to stack, and I usually decorate the day before needed. So say it's on a Saturday, I will bake on the Thursday night. I will wrap them once they have cooled, put them in the fridge overnight so that they are nice and cold, and then I stack them in the morning. I also find that this helps with the crumb coat, because you get less crumbs coming off, but you need to make sure that you are giving them plenty of time. I never stack cakes straight after, even if they are cool. I always leave them for longer. I always cling film them and put them in the fridge. I know sometimes people bake them in the morning and then stack them at like 11, but I just think it's too soon. A lot of the time when you're doing tiered cakes, that will lessen the structure. So yeah, just give yourself plenty of time for things to cool. You want to use stiffer buttercream. This is for the inside layers. For the outside, you can use a softer layer. I like to use a softer layer just because it smooths a lot nicer. But for the in-between layers, you need to make sure it's nice and stiff, because again, when you are stacking cakes, you need to make sure that that weight isn't going to push it down and make it bulge, which just doesn't look pretty. The next thing is to refrigerate. I know some people leave cakes at room temperature. I never do. My cakes, once they are stacked, they stay in the fridge until they're collected. Obviously, when they're being decorated, they're out the fridge, but they never stay out the fridge unless I'm actually doing something to them. And especially when you're doing tiered cakes, they need to be, and everyone takes this the wrong way, I think, but they need to be rock hard. And this isn't that when you're going to cut into them and eat it, it's going to be rock hard. It means that when you stack it, when you're decorating it, you want them to be rock hard. I don't really know how else to put it, but when you have done that crumb coat, then when you do the final coat, if they're left in the fridge, they're nice and hard, then you can do that second coat and it goes on so much smoother. And also when you're stacking them, it's so much easier. And then you literally leave it out for half an hour to 60 minutes and they're soft again. Whereas a lot of people do leave their cakes at room temperature, which I personally don't do, just because, think about it this way, if you're delivering a cake or if you're collecting it, that car journey, if someone puts their finger in it slightly or knocks the cake, then it's going to have a dent in it. Whereas if it's kept in the fridge, like I say, it's rock hard. So if someone puts their finger in it, it's not budging. There's not going to be a dent, nothing like that. And the stress when you're stacking a cake is that you have to flip it over, and if it's soft, then it could just give way, and you have to flip it over so that you have the board, and then you can flip it back over and put it on the dowels. So if you can't flip it because it's too soft and it hasn't been refrigerated, then you're going to have issues. So make sure they're in the fridge for as long as possible. The next thing is just to take your time with wedding cakes. I know birthday cakes, obviously, they're just as special because obviously a birthday should be just as special as a wedding because you can't do that particular birthday again, but you will have another birthday the next year, I think is what people's argument is. Whereas a wedding you only do once. There is a lot more pressure on it. There's photos for the day, and it needs to be perfect because it's considered that it's being done once. Obviously, people do get married more than once, but everyone thinks that they're only getting married once. So there's a lot more pressure on it, and people want it to be perfect. And that's why they cost more, even though some people don't agree with that. I do. There is a lot more stress in it. I was very stressed driving this cake to this wedding. It stressed me out a lot. I stopped about 5 times to make sure that the cake was all right. But it obviously gets easier the more you do. But yeah, I would definitely say that it's worth a higher hourly rate because it is very stressful. I don't stress about birthday cakes at all. I could literally make them with my eyes closed and I just don't stress about it. And that's because I've made so many. And that's not even, I haven't made so many that I've made hundreds and hundreds, considering I've only been running a year. But I just don't get stressed about it because my customers just give me the freedom to do my thing, basically. Whereas obviously a wedding cake, it can only be done once. You know, they want it to be perfect, and if it's not perfect, then you've ruined their big day. So yeah, that's why there's so much stress on it. That's why it is worth a higher hourly rate. And that's why you need to make sure that you're taking your time, you're putting in the effort, you're not rushing it, because if something goes wrong, you just don't want to be responsible or like blamed for ruining someone's day. It's just, I don't want that blame on my shoulders. So yeah, that's why you want to make sure that you're doing everything right. So fingers crossed, this hopes you do everything right. So in terms of stacking, so I will try and find them on Amazon. It's pretty, you can probably find them if I can't find them to link. But for stacking, I use 2 things. Actually, no, I use more than 2 things. But for my dowels, I use 2 things. So I use wooden dowels. So I use ones that are slightly higher than the cakes that I'm making. So I think it's roughly like 10 to 12 inches long. So they will go into a tier and then they will stick out to go into the tier above. I use boards. So I have a drum at the bottom, which is a board that is raised, whereas so that's a cake drum, and then a cake board is flat. So then I use the boards in between each of the tiers. If you don't use this, then there is no point in doweling your cake. I saw a photo. I will try and find something. I won't use that one because I don't want to sort of offend anyone, but I'll just find one off the internet and put it here. But basically, if you put dowels in your cake, it's worse than not doweling it at all if you put dowels and don't put boards. Because the way that a board works is you have the straws. So I use jumbo straws and then I use a centre dowel. The centre dowel goes all the way through all the cakes, and then the jumbo straws go in the individual tiers but not in the top tier because it doesn't need it. And I put in a 10 and 8 inch, so obviously the bigger the cake the more straws you need, but in a 10 to 8 inch I use 6 straws, and these are put in a circle. Obviously you need to make sure that they are no wider than the board above. So if the top tier above is a 6 inch, then you need to make sure you're not spreading those wider than a 6 inch, because what you want is that they are all placed in a circle, and then they are cut to the height of the cake. And then what you do is that next tier, when it goes on top and it's got the centre dowel going through it, that means that it can't wobble because it's doweled to the one below. And then the straws will rest on the board will rest on the straws, and then the weight of the cake above will be pushing against these straws like this, which means that it can't sink. Whereas if you don't have that board there, then the straws are going to cut through the layers, the straws below are going to cut through the layers above, and then it's just going to sink. So that's worse. And then if you don't have anything, the weight of the tier above is going to put weight on the one below, and then you're going to get bulging and it will probably fall over. And also it will have no way of not falling to the side because that centre dowel stops it from wobbling. So there is a lot that comes into the structure. I've done two tiered cakes, birthday cakes. 3 actually. I did one for myself, but I don't include that. So I haven't done many, but I just did my research on how to dowel them. I will try and put an image here. I'll draw a 3-tier cake so that you understand what I mean, just so that you can screenshot it or something, and then you can look at it at a later date. But that is how I stack. For 4 to 6 inch cakes, I use 4 dowels. This is 4 jumbo straws. And make sure that when you stack them, they are cool. This goes, you know, I said this when we talk about baking, but again, if they're not cool, then they'll want to expand sideways because of the weight. So if you stack a cake when it's warm, then the weight, because they are so heavy when you're doing tiered cakes, the weight is just going to push down, and then your cakes that are all nice and straight are just going to sort of bow from the weight, and they will tear. The sponge will end up tearing, and then yeah, you'll just have a cake that's fallen over. So don't stack when they're hot, and make sure you, I think, refrigerate your sponges. I always do. I think it's the easiest way. Once they're fully cooled, wrap them in cling film and put them in the refrigerator for a little while. It doesn't have to be very long. I usually do mine overnight just because I baked the night before, but if you don't, then you can just do it in the morning for like half an hour to an hour, and that will help. So we are now on to delivery, which is the nail biting part of the process. The setup isn't actually too bad because I quite like it, because everyone's like busy and like doing things because it's a wedding and they're all excited, so it's actually quite nice. But the delivery is scary because if it goes wrong, then there could be no cake, and if it goes right, then there is cake. So it is stressful, but just make sure that you are well prepared for the journey. You've thought about how you're going to pack the car, because if you've got no idea, then on the morning of, you could be really struggling to fit a cake in your car. So what I would say, delivery included in this, you need to set up at the venue. Typically, if it is anything over a 2-tier cake, do not let them collect it. This particular one, they did ask if they could collect, and I said no. Anything over a 2-tier, they cannot take in the car. Even if you really trusted them, I wouldn't trust that it would stay up, because they can be very wobbly, because they're so tall that they are very top heavy. They also can't be carried. Once I'd stacked this cake at the venue, I had a little trolley which it was put onto until it was then wheeled out to be cut, and it remained on this trolley the whole time, because even I picked it up, and you'd have to be very careful. You can't exactly walk down the road with it. You could lift it up and put it on a sideboard, but you can't get that out of a car where you're bent down and distribute your weight enough to be able to walk around with it. So you just can't have a 3-tier cake and carry it. Some people may disagree, but I just wouldn't risk it. It only takes a trip up a curb or something so small, and that cake is ruined. So yeah, I would say 2-tier, unless they are shallow tiers, but mine are 8 inches tall, so if I'm doing 3 tiers, I would not let someone collect. So yeah, I set up, I delivered with 2 tiers already stacked, just because it saves time, and I was confident that my driving was fine to have them both stacked. It was fine, they got there perfectly fine. And then what I did was stacked the last tier when I got there, and I mean that took long enough because I had to do all the flowers and the topper which she had purchased, so I added all those on for her. I would recommend offering to do this, just because even though they could probably do it themselves, it's allows you to get a photo, and it also means that you can make sure whether the flowers are fake or real, because if they are real, then they need to be wrapped. The stems need to be wrapped, otherwise you're going to have, I don't know what it's called, but like plant sap or whatever it's called, you're going to have that going into the cake, which obviously isn't going to be nice. So yeah, they need to make sure they're wrapped, whereas an individual might not know that they need to do that. So I would say always offer to decorate it. Allows you to get extra photos of the cake all finished and all stacked, and then it also helps out the customer, because I mean they are paying you to set up, which is why I offered, because she was paying me to set the cake up, and I felt like that was the least I could do, was to add all the flowers and finish it off for her rather than getting her to do that. So, like I say, don't stack more than 2 tiers, unless they are very shallow. Like if your cakes are 5 inches tall or 6 inches tall, then you might be able to get away with it, but mine are very tall, so that's why I wouldn't recommend, because it means that they're very top heavy and it will probably get dropped. This one, which I did not think about, but it was very important because it was a very hot day. It was meant to be a rainy day, and then it turned out to be really, really hot. So check for fridge space. So you want to ask your bridegroom whether there is a kitchen space at the venue and whether there will be fridge storage. I did not ask, and when I got there, it was fully packed with desserts and all of this. It was a self-catering hall that I delivered the cake to, so I feel like it was slightly more full, whereas if you were at a non-self-catering, then they wouldn't be bringing all their own desserts, so they had someone cater for them and deliver all these desserts, so they all went in the fridge. But if it was a venue where they were catering for you, not self-catering, then there might be more fridge space. I don't know. But definitely check that, because I felt like I needed the fridge, but I couldn't, so I had to work without it. Luckily, because my cakes have been in the fridge all night, when I flipped them over to stack the last tier, it was perfectly fine. And then we managed to find a cold storage cupboard where we left the cake on the trolley, all stacked, all decorated, flowers and everything, and it was nice and cool in there, dark, like no windows, etc. So then they just wheeled it out when they needed it. But yeah, I was definitely worried that they were going to message me later saying like, oh, it's fallen over because it was too hot or something, but luckily it didn't, so that was good. But yeah, check for fridge space, take a little kit with you. Again, I'm going to do a video on this because I don't think we have enough time, but I'm going to do a video saying what's in my bag, because I took a little bag with various different things, spare icing, scrapers, piping bags, gloves, some of my notes about the cake, my design as to what it's meant to look like, just basically anything that you would need if you were decorating a cake, because if anything goes wrong with the cake, so say it got damaged when you were delivering it, then you might need a scraper to smooth it out. You need spare buttercream for when you're stacking it to stick the board down to the next tier. Yeah, I just took scissors because I thought maybe they won't have scissors, all this stuff, but I will go through it in more detail. But make sure you take a little bag of like baking goodies, basically everything that you need when you decorate a cake, and then it means that you will have everything you need when you're stacking this cake and setting it up and all of that, and you won't have to panic basically because you'll have everything you need. So that is definitely a top tip. So again, when we're talking about planning your journeys, all of that, you need to plan how long it's going to take you to stack the cake. I planned half an hour, and that was to do like all the flowers and stuff, because I expected that there might be little delays in like maybe me getting the flowers, things like that. And then they wanted this trolley for the cake to go on, and it wasn't built. So I helped build that, so obviously that wasn't factored in, and it also wasn't my fault. I didn't know we were doing that, but I was happy to help with it, and we managed to get it all built and everything, the cake on it, perfectly fine. But yeah, I think you want to factor in a little bit more time just in case there's any extras that they want you to help out with, because like I think they wanted an extra pair of hands, so they were kind of happy that I was happy to help. But yeah, I think add in a little extra time if possible, so that you can help out with anything, not like general wedding stuff, but obviously this was to do with the cake. The trolley, the cake was going on, so the quicker we built that, then I could lift the cake onto it, whereas I don't think they wanted to put the cake on it themselves because they were worried about dropping it. So obviously I helped build that, so that then I was responsible for putting the cake on it, because I was like the cake lady basically. So I don't think they wanted to like risk me leaving and then them trying to put it on there. But yeah, just kind of help out with anything that you can in regards to your job, like whether you're making the cake. So yeah, just try and help out, because obviously it is a very stressful day, so that's why I was like, I'll help out, because I thought it will relieve some stress off someone else. So the next thing is to charge for delivery and setup. Again, it's probably a bit self-explanatory, but I feel like I should mention it. So In terms of, again, I'll get into pricing more specifically in a minute, but I charged for delivery, so per mile. So you want to work out the mileage to the venue and back, because obviously you are going to be travelling there and back. So you want to work out that, and then you also want to give yourself a hourly rate for setup because you are doing your job. I only did £10 for that because it took an hour, and I did £10 as the hourly rate because it isn't a very skilled thing. Obviously I had to stack the cake and finish decorating it, but it wasn't like the main kind of like skilled part of making the cake. Like obviously the baking process and the decorating at home was the skilled part, so I charged £20 an hour for that. But the actual setup time at the venue I just charged £10 for, just because I didn't think it was a skilled thing to do. So yeah, I just charged a base rate for that, and I was happy with that. And you also want to round it up, even if you're only there 45 minutes or half an hour. I would always round it up because it adds a tip to you, so they're not going to say, well, you only took half an hour, I'm not paying you for the whole hour. It just gives you a tip in the end, because you've got it done quicker. But it also means if you did take longer because you were helping out, or you got roped into doing something, then you've still been paid for your time. So in regards to the car specifically, make sure the car is cool. That is number one. I'm actually getting a new car soon, and I'm hoping that the aircon is going to be a little bit better because my car isn't great, and it's actually started doing this thing, and it did it on the day, where the passenger footwell has hotter aircon than the driver's footwell, and obviously I don't need it to be cold. And yeah, it was just blowing out hot air, and it was a hot day, but it started doing it other times, like when it's still a cold day. So I know that it's definitely doing it all the time. But yeah, and then the driver's side is freezing cold, and I don't need it to be freezing cold, so that's annoying. But hopefully my new car will be better. So make sure you keep it cool. Always direct the aircon to the footwell because you don't need it anywhere else unless the cake is in the boot. But if it's in the footwell, always just direct it at the footwell, then it will be full blast in there. Have a car sign. I'll put a little photo of mine here, but my mum made it for me, and it just says cake on board. I mean, people still literally get right up my arse, which is really annoying. I am going to get a sign, like a magnetic one that I can put on the outside of the car, because this one's inside and I feel like people can't see it as well. But I'm going to get a little magnetic sign that I can put on the back of the car, and it's basically so that if there are windy roads and you're literally going 30 miles an hour in a 50, then people aren't going to be beeping at you and like stressing you out, because that is just something that I hate when I'm trying to deliver a cake and I'm already stressed, or not stressed, but I'm already sort of worrying about being there on time and delivering the cake and it all being fine. If someone's beeping at me because I'm not going fast enough for them, or they're trying to speed, or they want to overtake me, it's just so much easier to have a little sign that just says cake on board, because then if they were to say anything to me, I'd say, what do you want me to do? Like, I've obviously got to make sure that this arrives perfect condition and you're affecting that, so leave me alone, because sometimes people can be really annoying in cars and get the worst road rage, whereas if you have a sign, then that is your excuse basically. So would definitely recommend. My mum laminated it at home, so it wasn't like I bought it, so yeah, it's definitely something that you could do at home yourself, and yeah, it just makes your life a little bit easier, because then if people get close to me, they see the sign and then they're like, oh, okay, maybe that's why she's driving a little bit like a granny, because I do. I get so scared because I'm so precious about my cakes. The next thing, again, allow plenty of time. Make sure that you're not stressing about your timings with the car, because you don't want to be speeding, you don't want to be not even speeding, but just driving a little bit carelessly because you're trying to get somewhere quickly. Whereas if you've got plenty of time, you can drive really carefully and not have to worry. Store in the boot or footwell. This is always what I recommend. If I can put it in the footwell, I will. This particular cake fitted in the footwell because it was 2 boxes. If it was 3 separate tiers, then I would have had to put it in the boot. And try and shield it from sunlight. So if there is sun coming through the window, whether it's the side or the back, try and put some kind of cover. Do not put anything black because that will attract the sun. Always put something white. So if I transport things in the boot, then I put a white like tablecloth on the parcel shelf, because my parcel shelf, and I think most people's, is black, so then at least that parcel shelf will like detract from the sunlight. So yeah, always recommend doing that. Obviously if it's a cold day you don't have to worry, and drive slow, because yeah, the person that is going to be up your ass because you're going slow isn't going to pay you when you ruin the cake. So yeah, it's just so much easier just to be careful and don't worry about what other drivers think. I used to be so worried, because cake makers will know, but you always drive carefully because you're worried about the cake. But yeah, I used to be so worried about it, and now I just don't care. I'm like, I'm going to go slow. If you don't like it, overtake me. So in terms of pricing, I will do a video on this, but we're just going to go over it briefly. So I charge £15 an hour for occasion cakes. Obviously this is based on your skill. You need to work out what your skill set is, and how high you think it is, and how much you think you're worth. Everyone is different. Everyone will different price. Some people might be really good but they don't charge it. But this is just how I price my cakes and how much I think I'm worth, and people are happy to pay it, so I will carry on charging that way. So for wedding cakes I charge between £20 and £25 an hour. That is based on the amount of stress. Again, I know that some people don't agree with that, because it's no different to an occasion cake, but I definitely think there is a lot more stress involved, and maybe if people make a lot of wedding cakes they might resonate with that and kind of understand. If you don't make a lot of wedding cakes, then you might not understand that price increase, but I definitely think it is something that is worth more money, and it's also something that not everyone does. That's what you've got to remember. Quite a lot of people don't touch wedding cakes, they won't do them. So if it's something that is more rare, then it's going to be worth more money. It's the same with every type of business. If it's more of a rare or refined thing, whether it's something that you cater for, then usually it's going to be more expensive. So yeah, £20 to £25 an hour. That's usually based on the design. If there is a lot of fondant, so things like ruffles, I don't do fondant covers, but because I prefer buttercream and I don't like covered fondant cakes. But if there's like ruffles, you know, like how they look a bit like a skirt, if there's ruffles around the base or there's some kind of fondant figures on it, then I will charge £25 an hour, because it is a lot more time consuming and skilled. But for buttercream it's £20 an hour, and if it's like a simple design, then £10 an hour for setup. Deposit is 25%, 40p per mile there and back. Again, this includes, because some people add it onto the top, and then they might charge less per mile, but I charge 40p a mile, and that includes my time, because it's not only the petrol you use, it's also your time, your driving time. Because someone could pay me £20 in petrol, but if I'm spending 2 hours driving somewhere, then that's 2 hours that I've lost. So they also need to pay you for the time that you could have been using to do something else. So yeah, because it's not just a case of you put petrol in your car and you get there, you've obviously lost the time. So that's why they need to pay a mileage rate, but also for your time. So I charge 40p a mile because that includes time, because you don't spend 40p per mile on petrol, but that includes my time as well. So again, that is what I charge. That's what I like. I found that I charge that because my sister is in the wedding business, and she charges that. She's a makeup artist and she charges that per mile. So that's where I got that figure from, because she said that she found that that was a reasonable rate. So that's where I got it from. You might find that another fee is better, but yeah, that's what I use. Flowers and toppers are extra. Make sure that you confirm this before they order, because you don't want to be coming back at a later date going, oh, you wanted a topper, you haven't included that in the price. Make sure that that is all laid out in advance. Any extras, because a lot of the time wedding cakes do have extras, and they are a lot more expensive because there is a lot more ingredients and things involved. And flowers will be expensive if they're from a florist, because they are all fresh, whereas if they got artificial ones, then they would probably be cheaper depending on where you get them from. So yeah, make sure that it's all done in advance. And this rolls into this next one, which is make sure that you not only take a 25% deposit, but any cost of any extras is taken in advance. So the way that I do it, for occasion cakes, I will take £20 deposit ahead, and if they want, say, plastic figures on the cake, or if they want flowers, I will add the cost of those flowers onto the deposit, so that I'm still getting my £20 deposit. I'm not using the deposit to pay for these extras, and then that means that I can use the extra money, which will be the exact cost. So say it's like £13, and then £20 deposit, I can use that £13 to pay for the flowers, and then I still have my £20 deposit, because you don't want to be using that, because then you end up with like a £7 deposit, and then it means that if someone was to cancel and not get their deposit back, then it's going to be a lesser cost. So you would have spent, say, £13 on those flowers, and then they're only losing £7, but you're actually losing 20. Whereas if you take the cost for the items, then you still have that deposit. Works the same with wedding cakes. You take that 25%, and then any flowers paid up front, any toppers paid up front on top of that deposit. And then you just take that off the remaining balance, and then they pay the remaining balance a week before. So yeah, make sure you take payment for anything that you have to pay in advance, because you're paying it in advance. You're paying the florist before, or you're paying for this topper from someone on Etsy. You have to pay all that in advance, so then the customer should pay you in advance. So yes, that is the pricing side. It's very, very complicated, but I'm hoping that that was useful. That is everything that I wanted to say. But yeah, overall, I had a very good first experience. There were no issues, apart from the cake not being as red as I would like. But that, I didn't consider it an issue. I just rebaked it. It was fine. And there were no issues on the day. There was a little bit of stress when I was driving. That's just because it was freezing in the morning, and then literally as soon as I got in the car, the sun was beaming on the cake, and I was like, oh my god. And I didn't have space in the boot to move it, and that was a lot of hassle, and it was only 10 minutes away from me, so I was like, right, I'm just gonna have to brave it. We're gonna have to carry on, and we're gonna have to hopefully get there. But yeah, once I got there and I stacked it, it all went great, and I was very, very happy with how it all turned out. I'll put a photo of the cake here. But yeah, so it all went well, but I would just say be prepared in advance, because then you will stress less on the day when you're baking, and just try and enjoy it, because they're going to enjoy it. It's going to be an amazing day, hopefully, for the bride and groom, and yeah, you just want to enjoy the process, as stressful as it can be. But yeah, I'm definitely excited for all the other weddings. To be fair, I'm quite used to weddings, which I think is why I probably wasn't as stressed when I got there, because I do assist my sister, because she's a makeup artist and a hairstylist for weddings. So I assist her, so I do go to quite a lot of weddings. So I feel like they're not scary to me, because I go to quite a few with her and do people's hair and makeup. So yeah, I'm kind of used to the environment now. But yeah, all I would say, if you're starting out and you want to do weddings, is just try it. I mean, you might do one and you hate it, and that's absolutely fine, but you might find that you love it. It's obviously a skilled work, because there are people that won't do it because it is stressful, but it's also a nice, like, if I'm completely honest, it is a nice money maker, because the cakes are usually bigger, which obviously means that they cost more, and they're more skilled, so they're going to cost more. But yeah, so I think it's a nice industry to be in if you can handle the stress, which I think I'm pretty good at. So we're all good there. But yeah, it's definitely a nice experience, and I obviously took lots of notes from it. So I'm hoping that you guys found this useful, and if you're considering getting into wedding cakes, please let me know down below, because I would love to hear. And if you've done wedding cakes before, again, let me know in the comments, because I'd love to hear from fellow bakers how you dealt with like your first wedding and all of that, because it can definitely be scary. But if there's anything you want me to go over, again, let me know, and I'm happy to do a video on it. I will be doing a video on pricing for weddings and normal, because it has changed slightly, and I will also be doing a what's in my bag for weddings, so everything that I take when I'm doing a wedding cake, because there is just so much stuff that you should take, because you need to prepare for every kind of situation, anything that could go wrong with the cake that you might need to fix, whether it's due to the heat or it getting accidentally damaged, anything like that. So yeah, you definitely need to have a little like crisis kit, I think, where you can just have this bag and then there's everything you need in it. So I will be doing a video on that. That will probably go up on Tuesday next week, whilst I'm away. And there is a podcast this weekend. I know that it's been slightly slacking. I've been super busy, but this week is the dilemmas one, which I actually asked like a week ago. So that is finally coming up, and it's also got video. So it's going to be my first podcast video. So yes, I'm very, very excited about the podcast video. I've got a little setup behind me in my office now for the podcast. It still needs a little bit of work, but it's definitely at the point where I can now use it, and then I'm just going to try and improve it as we go along. But yeah, so we're going to be doing the dilemmas, so it's like business and cake dilemmas that people have sent in. So we're going to be doing that one this weekend, so that will be up on Sunday, and there will be video on YouTube as well. So very exciting. But yeah, that is everything that I wanted to talk about in this video. If you have any questions, as usual, either message me on Instagram, sweetthingsbyamy, or just follow me on there if you want to look at my cakes. And if you are happy to message me on here in the comments, then feel free to do that. But if you want a private convo, then feel free to message me on Instagram. My DMs are always open. I sometimes take a couple of days to reply just because I'm busy, but I will always get back to everyone. So yeah, that is today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!